Districts should plan for a fall reopening for all students.
I do not believe that school in the fall will look like school in the fall of 2019. It will be very different.
We're doing a lot with distance learning and online, but there's nothing like the classroom.
This will not be a normal semester at UConn or for any college in the country.
We don't want schools to be an issue that cause a resurgence.
We have time to do this right. You're going to have to distance the kids.
I mean, those days where we all lined up and, parents are there to say goodbye to their children, and that's gone.
The first few weeks of school is building a sense of community and belonging, and that will be a challenge come this fall.
We're used to putting 50 children on a bus. That will no longer be permitted. It will be 10 children to a bus.
As much as I want to be playing basketball at the rec center or playing baseball with my friends, I'd much rather have everyone be healthy.
I believe that schools will never be the same again.
Live from WFSB, this is a special edition of Face the State with Dennis House, the return to school.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Dennis House. Welcome to this special live Thursday night edition of Face the State, which we scheduled to cover the breaking news that broke late this afternoon, Governor Lamont's big back-to-school plan. Tonight, our focus is on education and what school will look like when kids in grades K through 12 return for the 2020-2021 school year. Our guest tonight, Connecticut Commissioner of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. Dr. Cardona, thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here with you.
You've had a very busy day, and there's so much to talk about tonight, so let's get right to the major headline. You announced today that students will go back to school every day for 5 days every week. We have a viewer question on that point. O'Shea of Windsor wants to know, quote, why would the governor want students to attend school 5 days a week with all that is going on? What do you think, Commissioner?
Well, what we're finding is it's extremely challenging to have to predict 2 months out where we're going to be. And as we mentioned earlier today, the spread of COVID will be the best predictor of whether or not that's possible. What we want districts to do based on how the success of Connecticut over the last 2 months in particular is plan for a full reopening, knowing that there's also expectations for hybrid planning and even remote learning if the numbers increase to the point where it's not safe to bring students back. We do want students to know that we are planning for a fall reopening, and we know that that's how they learn best.
I'm curious, how did you come up with this plan, and whose voices were you listening to?
So we met weekly with members of teachers groups, administrator groups, superintendent groups. We've been meeting weekly for the last 2 months, at minimum, 2 to 3 months. We also had focus groups that were done regionally, because we know in different regions of Connecticut, the effects of COVID were different. So in those groups, we had parents, principals, teachers, district leaders as well. We had focus groups with students. We had focus groups with parents to try to get as much information as possible, in addition to the surveys that we put out, where we got high-level information.
Yeah, I want to talk about these parents for a bit, because you did say that them being able to go back to work certainly was a big consideration. Exactly what is the obligation that the state or town or city has when it comes to providing an education for children?
Right. We need to provide a free, appropriate public education. The decision to return to school was made based on health indicators. We knew that even in the spring, if you recall, there were times where we held off on class cancellations because we wanted to see if the health indicators got better. When they didn't, it's an easy choice. If it's not health, if the health indicators indicate that it's not safe to go back, we don't go back. That's the bottom line. We don't want schools to be places where we're sending students if there's high risk for infection. In fact, we've been working most closely with the Department of Public Health and a team of epidemiologists and public health experts to determine the requirements of the plan and the guidelines of the plan. So I think that's really important to remember.
Let's talk about this.
These decisions are based on health indicators primarily.
Commissioner, let's talk about when the school year does start. Families have been living their lives. Some have been really strict about social distancing, some being a little bit more looser about it, as you know. So we had a lot of viewers asking, how do they know that their child is entering a school and a classroom that's COVID-free? It's a concern for a teacher who wrote us from the town of New Milford. Karen Rivero is her name, and she wrote that my colleagues and I are concerned with the health uncertainty within our incoming students' homes and how that will impact not only our health, but that of their classmates. What kind of screening will be in place, Commissioner, prior to their entry into our building?
Right. So that's a great question, and it's on everyone's mind. You know, as a parent, it's on my mind too. And the answer to that is that we have parents monitor, and obviously we're going to communicate a lot about not sending students to school if they're having any symptoms. Staff are going to be encouraged to stay home or required to stay home if they're showing any symptoms. While we don't require health checks of temperature, you know, some districts will choose to do that. But I think the best answer for that teacher is it's really important that her and others that have interest in developing the school's plan communicate their concerns and make sure that they feel comfortable with the district's plan. We debated whether or not it's good to have a one-size-fits-all, and we know that local control is really important. So having teachers like Karen be a part of that process or communicate what her interests are and what the requirements she would feel comfortable with be communicated while the district is developing their plan.
You know, Doctor, before we go to break, I want to ask you about this word you used to say, cohorts in schools. What do you mean by that?
So when you cohort, it means that you have a finite number of students that you're engaging with. So for example, if there's a class of 20 students, those 20 students are the only 20 students you engage with during the day. And the teacher, let's say, so there's 21. Those 21 stay together the whole day. They're not mingling with other students like you might see in some schools where students leave one class and go to another class and there's a different set of students. So cohorting is what was found to be one of the best strategies to contain any type of spread, but also limit exposure to students and staff.
We will continue our conversation with the Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, after this brief break. Up next with Dr. Miguel Cardona. He is the Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Education. Commissioner and Doctor, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'll call you both titles. We'll go back and forth. How's that sound? You earned it. We're going to call you that. You talked about a little bit about how many people will be in school, these cohorts, but paint a picture for me, if you will, of what a day in elementary and high school will look like. Does each class stay in its own room? Are the students going to have to go to the cafeteria? What about gym class, middle and high school? So we have this question from Marzina. We got a lot of questions on this as to what the day will look like. And she's asking specifically, will it be possible to have kids return but stay in one classroom and have the teachers switch classrooms instead of the kids? I know in high school and middle school, they tend to move around, correct?
So, you know, I appreciate the fact that question came with a suggestion or a thought. We know that, you know, if we were to think that we were to come up with one plan that has all the answers for everything, we'd be fooling ourselves and limiting the potential innovation that's out there. Not to mention that districts are not built the same, right? And schools are not built the same. So we put out those guardrails, and we're asking districts to develop plans now with the thinking of the teachers, the parents, the students, the school administrators, people that know that school, that community best, to come up with strategies. So what an elementary day might look like is we might be using different entrance points, so students are not all congregating in one area. We might be having students met by their teacher as opposed to a different teacher that might be on duty, or different staff members. They bring their students into the classroom. It could even be a staggered schedule where we have one grade come in at one time, another grade at another time if it allows. So we have the students come in, the teachers bring them into the classroom. They're set up, they go through their morning routine, they're given more frequent breaks outside, get some fresh air, maybe recesses 2-3 times a day to get some fresh air. Maybe the students are having class outside a little bit, they come inside, maybe they grab their lunches, or lunches are brought to their classroom door, they grab them, go out, eat outside, come back in when it's possible. Obviously when it gets colder, it's difficult to do that. But then you bring it in. If they have art for that day, the art teacher might be coming in as opposed to the students walking through the hallway to the art room. Now, it's not ideal. And it's not what it was in 2019, but the alternative is third graders home on a computer, or even worse, not having access to technology and limiting their ability to grow, not to mention the socialization.
I want to talk about mass.
In a high school, yes, in the high schools, I'm sorry, you asked about high schools too.
Yeah,
so high schools, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because it's harder to cohort students in high schools. With students having different classes, it's going to be required that they move around. So you might have hallways with arrows that go only in one direction, so students are not passing each other. You might have a staggered bell system where freshmen move at one time, sophomores move at another time. And mask use at the high schools is going to be something that's going to be relied more upon because you can't do the cohorting. But those are some strategies. And high schools have more space, so maybe we're going to be creative about where we put students to learn and give them space to spread out, including auditoriums with distance learning options there.
Doctor, you brought up masks, so I want to ask about that because we get a lot of questions about this. And one of them is, if Governor Lamont's executive order is up on September 9th, why would kids be expected to wear masks? Another question on masks comes from a viewer in Farmington. Many classrooms have no air conditioning, and classrooms reach temperatures in the 90s in August and September. It's hard enough to breathe as it is. How will this work with masks? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I was an elementary teacher and elementary school principal, and I know that some of those classrooms, especially the ones facing where the sun comes up, are brutal. And those are challenges that I know districts are going to have to be grappling with in the next couple of weeks to think about how do we use our space, how do we use the air circulation system differently, do we need fans, how do we make it so that it's comfortable enough for students to want to be in school and come to school. Those are all considerations that I know districts are taking into account today when the plan came out.
So Kara and I have a tween and a teenager at home, and we impress upon them the importance of wearing masks. They don't really like them. And this other viewer wrote in, Noel is not optimistic about students wearing masks. She tells us that there's no way kids can wear masks. They will be touching them so much it will only spread the germs. The issue with the mask is that, per the CDC, they are not supposed to be taken on and off. And it's a good point, doctor, because and a lot of it depends on age. A 15-year-old knows to keep the mask on. A 5-year-old may not.
You know, we had extensive conversation with our partners at DPH. This was one that was very difficult to come to the agreement that a requirement is necessary. But at the end of the day, when we talk about health and safety and why we're able to talk about bringing students in the fall, it's because we're leaning on the expertise of our health experts. We're leaning on what they know about spread of germs. And there was a strong feeling that requirement is what it should be. And that if we start early and impress upon students the expectation, like they do in many other countries, that there's a likelihood that students will pick it up and they're resilient. But I understand the challenge. I think the flip side of that is if we say masks are optional, then there's a very good likelihood that many students are going to choose not to do it. And then we're creating a greater risk. And then we have to worry about whether or not teachers were protecting our staff and our students, other students that are wearing masks. So there are no easy answers here. I want to be very clear about that. There are no easy answers. We're giving it our best approach based on what we know from our public health experts.
We appreciate you being so candid and joining us now. We're going to take a quick break. We'll talk about e-learning next.